Good afternoon. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager at the Seattle Public Library. As we begin today, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, these are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders past and present and thank them for their stewardship of this land. Welcome to today's program with the Jack Straw Writers, presented in partnership with Jack Straw Cultural Center. We would like to thank Author Series sponsor Gary Kunis and the Seattle Times for generous support of library programs. We're also grateful to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. I have a couple quick announcements before we get started. First, the wonderful folks at Open Books have copies of this year's Jack Straw Writers Anthology available. And Open Books is available, I think, for browsing by appointment still, or you can order through their website or order and pick up. And I'll pop a little link to their site in the chat in just a minute. I also wanted to let you know that after the readings conclude, we'll have time for your questions, and you can type your questions at any time in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I also wanted to let you know, if you didn't already, that we have closed captioning available, and you just can access that by clicking the closed caption icon that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And finally, at the end of the program, I'll post a little link to a post-event survey. We do that after every program, and it's an opportunity for you to share what you think about the programs that we're doing and recommend other people that you'd like to see. So if you take a minute after the event to share your thoughts, that would be much appreciated. Now I'm delighted to introduce EJ Koh. 2021 Jack Straw Writers Program curator E.J. Koh is the author of the memoir The Magical Language of Others, published in 2020 by Tin House Books, which was the winner of the Washington State Book Award and winner of the Pacific Northwest Book Award. It was also longlisted for the PEN Open Book Award. And E.J. is also the author of a poetry collection, A Lesser Love, and winner of the Pleiades Editor's Prize for Poetry. So please help me welcome EJ Koh and jump in the chat and let's give EJ a round of applause in the chat. Hey EJ.
Hi, Stesha. Thank you so much. And I think I have to mention that it was Stesha who reminded me to submit the book for the Washington State Book Award. So actually, Stesha's a huge part of that. I should include
Aw.
it in the bio line. So
Oh, that's very sweet. Although I do want to say I'm not on the judging committee, so
yeah,
no inappropriate things
it
happened. I just
was
love the book.
it was just a reminder, and sometimes I feel like lots of writers might need something like that. So thank you
Oh,
for pulling me out of my cave. But I'm so excited for tonight's reading. I think it's one of my favorite readings of the year, and I have my Jack Straw anthology for this year, the 2021, if you see it here. So if you haven't picked up a copy, it's just wonderful and amazing. And when I was pulling this up, I found the one for 2016 that I got a chance to be a part of. And I see these names, and at the time all of us were just starting and we're trying to write and connect to different communities. But now these names are sort of, you see them everywhere. Like Shinny Pai was part of this group. She's like the poet laureate of every city, and Robert Lashley and Corinne Manning and all these wonderful writers. So to me, it feels like this anthology is just the beginning, and we will be seeing all these writers and all their accomplishments and all their wonderful books very soon. So I'm looking forward to that. The first reader for tonight is C. I get the honor of introducing C. C is a non-binary queer first-generation Afro-Caribbean American who won the Borough President's Award for Poetry and has been supported by fellowships through Jack Straw Writers, Hugo House, FONA, and Hurston Wright. I'm so excited to welcome C.
Thank you, EJ, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. Oh, well, no place better to start than from the anthology. I'll read a piece from there. Conception 1b. Beginning. Granny's 4. Granny sails alone, a teen by boat, legs spread for her by some unwanted, familiar old, darkness eclipsed, a veiled birth, seeing realms beyond, child of the pandemic. She said just one photo, sumo-sized little man with violet eyes, a quick last snap, flash, followed by a quick snip, child gone too soon. Another quickly followed, Auntie's breath gasps, months of adolescence encased in sterile white walls shining against her crimson highlight. Child of the institution. The world powers feuded a second time. Ration cards filled to the brim once, and Auntie's eyes beamed joys of deflated balloon and noisemaker. Child of the war. She thought it was her last, but Mom tottered in, pistol and machete, greased brown bag rolled in 2-year-old fists. Abandoned. Shadow child. Next, I'll read from a longer manuscript piece that will hopefully be out soon. Herstory 1. Long before. On our own vessels, purpose hinging on the story of the ones who came before, pieces overhead in parts, assembled. 2. The journey right before. With great reverence for the crown and passive resistance of the West Indian, the matriarch ruled the land. Mighty hand and machete, manager of books and the susu, executor of form and ritual, thirst for piety and perfection, the black protege of the colonizer's troop. 3. Right before. Growing arms for countless activities, burdens fall and guardians saunter away. Another failure to thrive. She began to show on a ferry ride, udder tucked within her pants, deciding, keep family or let the baby go and lose your mind. What's known wins. She scrawled and tucked all of her into the spine of a teddy bear. She pushed, held him, and let him go, and let him go, and kept him near. 4. Just before, Tony. 1979, mouths hang dry, stomachs grown accustomed to barren lands which cannot feed another mouth. Not right now. Dying breeds of onlys, of minorities, of the blends of distant lands spared, and then there were 2 children. We went unnoticed for 5 months, left soaked in endless possibilities of lifetimes remembered, tethered to toes, funneled Corzol, coffee, and candy laced between concoctions of the Caribbean. Her mind floated free of her body, yet water cannoned to the floor. The baby was arriving faster than they could break. This baby came coated in the slime and muck of the child before, yet this one would be chosen. Tony couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't bear another child. Eden. Be like tomato, poison the wealthy, nourishment for the poor. Travel by wind, create your own seed without suitor or dowry, alone by the sun of midday. Be like amaranth, the one that does not wither for 40 days on its own sustenance, 40 days kissing the clouds scorched by the sun, burn bright in gold, purple, and red. Offer yourself to the gods. And my last piece for this evening, Firstborn. And thank you for your time and attention. Firstborn. Stillbirth is stillbirth, still squeezing out clotted nothing. Still exhausted by the ways it wears me. Still drowned in the deafening shrills. Still swaddling hope from neck to toes. Still warmed in its presence, knowing future. Stillbirth is still birth. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, C, for your reading. Our next reader is Patrycja, daughter of Polish immigrants. She's a writer, editor, and facilitator working on her first book, Anchor Baby.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight to be here with my brilliant cohort. And I'm just going to pull up my poems here. I'll read a few poems from my in progress manuscript. And the first one is a newer one. There's what I think and what I feel, and I don't always know which is mine. Cheek pressed against wood once alive. When I see the cross on the hill near Pilgrimage Bridge, part of me is kneeling inside. I can't turn away fast enough. Someone else's dreams were stitched to this connective tissue before I could give permission. Glia of inherited longings makes my nervous system the closest thing to family I don't have photos of. Fragments linger in my philtrum, little valley. Psalms trying to find a place to rest. The bear that shattered the glass door in my dream brought a message. Something about quiet. My weather app says a nearby river is flooding. Brings to surface another dream. Flooded gymnasium of floating shoes, people wringing out hats, shin deep in cloudy water with a troubling lack of urgency. I was standing in the water too, willing my feet to dry. The next poem is from our Jack Straw anthology, which you can get at Open Books. I found a lover and we left the city temporarily. Crackle of the fire said as much. Temple into the sprawl of limbs which came later. First, the alchemists. Oysters we ate quietly as we could, laughing, not saying a word, eyes full of language. And it wasn't that no one had ever touched me before, but it had never been like this. Tunnelless, not a search for a prize zippered pearl to coax out of grieving, not the scarcity of hardship or the dismissal of it, but we did look up, air glow, sky, a cicatrix, purpling, paler, damage and the need to undo it, not to fix, but to unribbon the past. My mama grew up in a rural place, rolling hills of jade. My name betrayed her wish to leave that lack. Szlachetnie urodzona, desire for wealth and its associated ease. I don't blame her for using a name like a tool for weeding. I too prune and tug at my story, but she wanted me to live up to my name, and for that I might blame her. I learn other names, plants that please me, forsythia, hyacinth, pyracantha. My lover gives me a dried bouquet. I prefer weeping, willow, even seaweed, something of water. I want not to say this, but to be understood with my eyes the way I was for a moment by the fire. but some lovers are not for lasting, though that part comes later. If I, must I tell the truth? On devotion, not the splendor of the dead king's baths, but the peacocks demanding devotion. Is it devotion to pour a glass of water for your lover, alone in the back of a candlelit mass in English, not the vaulted frescoes of my childhood basilica, mumbled prayers in Polish, lit a candle for my mother's parents who I never met. I had questions for God. Do you renounce imperialism? Winters ago, on the phone, a friend saying, jealousy is good because it is a form of protection. But what if protection is a form of harm? Winter again, snowed in, my lover shoveling flake after flake out my mouth and into the slush pile, the pathway out to where the roads are closed. That it rarely snows where I now live delights and disturbs me, e.g. kiwis ripening in early December. The Midwestern Polish priest, a family friend, sends vaccine conspiracy theory videos via WhatsApp. Along the fence, strong lights remind me of snow, where white camellias grow instead. That I want to see every body of water, lava, lands I don't know the name for, the Red Sea. Isn't it enough to have seen flamingos, pink with feeding in the salt flats in the driest desert in the world? Sometimes I think of God while washing my feet. I think of where I have not walked, my longing to go further. And my last poem for you is, I think, fitting for Scorpio season. Appetite. Plucking nasturtiums, not mine. Summer being a kind of aggression. Take, eat, sweat. I'm not ungrateful. Still, I could have fewer expectations. The blackberries in nearby woods are unripe, have no faces. Not expressionless, just not in a rush to reveal themselves. What confession would you like from me? What I fear? That I wish to never hunger? The creature I am kin to is many-eyed, but the eyes are nearly useless. A scorpion is propelled by scent, by touch, by particles displaced, feeling for the question you harbor, your breath on the page. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd love to put out there that we have podcast interviews with each of the writers on the beautiful new Jack Straw website if you want to hear more or listen to how each writer talks about their project and their process. So our next reader is Jose. He was born and raised in Mazatlan, Mexico, and immigrated to Seattle 25 years ago, where he strives to balance his passion for technology with his innate call to contemplate and create literature both in English and Spanish.
Thank you, EJ. I want to thank Jack Straw and especially the Seattle Public Library for hosting us this rainy afternoon. The following piece is part of my final Jack Straw project. It is titled The Goddess of Mercy. I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I enjoyed working on it. The Goddess of Mercy. In life, nothing is coincidental. I recently learned this from a porcelain figurine I remember from my childhood. As a kid, there were few department stores in Mexico. The closest we had was Fábricas de Francia, which was so unaffordable that most people only stepped inside to enjoy the air conditioner and pretend they live elsewhere, not a tiny, tropical coastal town. Independently owned stores cater to our every need. The mercería carried sewing materials and textiles. The papelería stocked office and school supplies. The ferretería sold hardware. But if anyone needed home decorations, the best place in town was indisputably Lupita's gift shop. A glass display case showcasing ornaments for sale spanned the width of the entrance. Behind the case, a long wall with shelves held layaway items, a practice that differentiated Lupita's shop from others that required cash upfront. Displaying layaway items also sped up payments. A tag revealed who had set aside a particular product. Items collecting dust became a personal embarrassment. When I was in elementary school, a wave of all things Asian swept through our town. All of a sudden, martial arts and yoga were the rage, and decorating with lacquered folding screens and figurines of laughing Buddhas and elephants encrusted with glass beads became fashionable, just like it used to be popular to decorate with lace hand fans and slender Lladró porcelain figurines from Spain. Lupita couldn't keep enough Asian decorations in stock to satisfy her customers. Of all the ones she sold, the most prized was a figurine of the Guanyin. Back then, no one knew that Guanyin was her real name. Some people incorrectly referred to her as the female Buddha, or thought she was a Chinese geisha. Most people simply call her La Monita China, the little Chinese doll, and that's the name that stuck. The guayins that circulated in Mexico were typically made of white porcelain and stood on top of a round black lacquered wooden base. The most peculiar thing about these monitas chinas was that you could detach one of the small porcelain hands to find a cavity inside their arm. According to Lupita, the hand detachment had an esoteric purpose. Those in the know could write a petition on a piece of paper, roll it, and stuff it inside before reattaching the hand. Supposedly, after some time, the request would be granted. Putting a request inside a small porcelain figurine wasn't that far-fetched. Mexicans are used to strange traditions involving saints born in faraway lands, like putting a ribbon over the arms of San Charbel Makhlouf, the Lebanese saint, to petition a favor, a practice that started in Mexico City, or setting an effigy of St. Anthony of Padua upside down until the petitioner finds a spouse. My mother fully embraced the Asian trends out of peer pressure. She had recently arrived in town after marrying my dad and knew barely any acquaintances. Like most other housewives, she ordered a monita china from Lupita. Several months later, after a litany of small payments, she brought it home and proudly displayed her in our living room. My mom petitioned her for money and more customers for my father. But most of all, she wished to meet more women like herself and finally find some true friends. I once tried a request of my own. I was learning how to write, so I scrawled on a tiny piece of paper that I tore from my drawing notebook and jammed it inside her arm. When my mom found it, she laughed so hard that it made her day. I felt happy for her. I didn't learn the Monitas China's real name until long after I moved to Seattle, when I started patronizing a Chinese restaurant and eventually became good friends with the owners. They introduced me to oolong tea and taught me how to drink it the way it's done in China. Quickly, Tea Guanyin became my favorite. I learned that Tea Guanyin means Iron Goddess of Mercy and that the tea was named after the Guanyin, a Buddhist bodhisattva associated with compassion. When I saw her depiction I immediately recognized my mom's Monita China. I felt as if the figurine had followed me to Seattle, giving me comfort in the form of a calming and nurturing hot cup of blossoming oolong tea that I enjoyed with my new friends in a strange, faraway land. Nothing in life is fortuitous. Although I don't fully understand it, perhaps this is a sign that the Guan Yin finally decided to grant our innermost requests. My mother still has very few friends, but she lives surrounded by grandkids who adore her. I was finally able to study creative writing and got accepted to the Jack Straw Writers Program. My nephews will finally be able to get vaccinated pretty soon. Perhaps Lupita was right about the Monita China. Perhaps the Guanjin has finally taken pity on us all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jose. I'm happy to welcome Greg to the stage. Originally from the Northeast, Greg is a Seattle-based writer and writing teacher with an MFA from UC Irvine.
Thank you, EJ. What a wonderful event this has been so far. I'm so happy to be taking part in it. I have two things that I'm going to read, two short stories to read, one of which is fairly ridiculous. I'll read the non-ridiculous first. This one is called The Summer They Kept Dying. In August, astronomers discovered a hole in the universe, 1 billion light years across, with no matter in it. I mentioned this to Jonas as we ripped up carpet, some of it practically new, in yet another old-timer's room. It was the summer they kept dying. Talk about lonely, Jonas said. We carried rolls of ripped up carpet to the van. We carried plastic-wrapped rolls into the building. So what's in the hole? Jonas said. We scooted on our knee pads, not facing each other. Nothing. That's the point. It's empty. How could a space so large be empty? Jonas was the sort of guy who could declare something, establish a fact of existence, but make it seem like he was asking a question. Each time a resident died, the carpet got changed, corporate policy and all. This was our job for the summer. Other teams worked other jobs. At least Jonas and I, working here in Newington, weren't putting on highway miles. At lunch, we went to a pub and ate burgers and drank beer. When we returned to work, Jonas started in again about his father. It was his turn. I talked about mine yesterday. He earned his money late in life and never knew how to act with it, Jonas said. In his head, he was still struggling. At 52, he bought a boat, a 20-foot sailboat. He had no idea how to sail. He knew how to pull the boat from the slip, bump it against the dock, and fiddle his way into the harbor. He knew how to pour drinks, and smoke cigars, and remark on the weather. My mother wore sarongs, and my brothers did their homework. I was the oldest. Once, he brought us all out at night to look at the stars from the middle of the bay. My brother, the youngest, lost his balance in the dark and tumbled off the boat, and my father threw himself in after him, still holding his drink. Jonas stopped there because the plastic on the roll we were hoisting into the room snagged on the door frame, and we had to jostle it this way and that. I had known Jonas for years, the two of us having come on with Burroughs around the same time. But it wasn't until that summer that I learned about his father, or that I told him about mine, and the colon cancer that took him when I was in high school. Jonas peered at me from around the carpet roll. Back up, let's try this again. For a moment, I didn't know what he meant. Then I felt him pushing. We muscled carpets in and out of hot rooms, sweating beer and beef patties, pickles. The old-timers appraised us from their walkers and chairs. Other teams had other jobs. Jonas and I erased death. We couldn't laugh in its face, not exactly, so we talked to ignore it. It was a bit like sailing through the darkest part of the universe. And the second piece I want to read for you, consider yourselves warned, it is fairly ridiculous. I wrote it just a couple days ago, actually. It was a little bit of a stressful week at work, as I think a few folks attending tonight also experienced. So I wrote something to distract myself, and I'm breaking from tradition and reading something brand new and untested. So we'll see what happens. This is a bit of flash, a short story called Bruce. In the days since we left Earth, Moroni has complained that we don't have anything good to read. Yeah, okay. I tell him we left in a rush, right? We hardly had time to pack clothing and enough food for the journey, let alone reading material. Be happy we have granola, I tell Moroni. Toilet paper. Listen, Moroni says, turning from the control panel and leveling one of his infamous stink eyes at me. Don't tread on me with that sunshine and rainbows. Suddenly, Moroni stops talking. He looks past me toward the flight deck entrance. What is that? Through the open door, a turtle creeps into the flight deck. That's Bruce, I say. Bruce. Yeah, Bruce. My pet turtle? You brought a turtle? I brought a turtle, yes. Of all the... You brought your turtle? And I didn't have time to grab a few books? Things were exploding around us. Moroni unstraps, grabs his cane from the hook, and limps toward the entrance. My hip is killing me, he says. I'm headed back to the bunk to rest. You and Bruce can fly the stupid ship. Unstrapping myself, I lift Bruce into Moroni's vacated seat and then restrap. I hit the thrusters and the ship lunges forward. Hopefully, I say to Bruce, he'll be in a better mood when we get to the colony and he sees all the beautiful gardens everyone planted. Bruce pulls his head into his shell. Yeah, I say. There's just no telling with Moroni. Thank you.
I'm like mid laughter. Thank you, Greg. And thank you for reading something brand new. I heard lots of snaps in the background. Our next reader is Tochukwu. Tochukwu is a Nigerian writer whose work has appeared in the 2018 Best of the Net, the 2019 Best Small Fictions, The Guardian, Harvard's Transition Magazine, Columbia Journal, and elsewhere.
Good evening, and thank you, EJ, so much for the introduction. And also thanks to the Seattle Public Library for the opportunity to share my words this evening. I will be reading from my fiction that appeared in the Jack Straw Anthology 2021, which is very gorgeous, and you should grab your copy. The piece I'm reading from is titled America, America. I hope you enjoy my reading. America, America. The night before I leave Onitsha for Lagos, I tell Mama that I now live with a man, full-time, as a married couple, as man and man. We sit on the faded red and black checkered cushion in the spacious parlor that is home to chirping crickets at night and geckos and spiders by daytime. With a face as gloomy as a faithful at a funeral mass, Mama wraps her arms around her, pressing her fist into her sides, like she did when the news of Papa's death swept in through our front door. A man, you, live with a man. Isigini. Our words emerge one after the other like a 4-year-old counting numbers. Perhaps I should also tell her that she owes me a certain kind of gratitude for coming out the way I just did, boldly, without mincing my words, without having to send revelatory letters from across the Nigerian border. Doesn't she know that her son could spend 14 years in prison for this? I may never get to see the four walls of a Nigerian prison, or even get close to smelling the foul stench of that sort of place. What if I am stoned to death or burnt at a stake for committing the crime of loving a man? But Mama shifts in her seat, as if shifting will make what I had said settle well in her stomach. She kisses her teeth and then bites her lip. Her face loses its glow sigh by sigh, breath by breath, to the moonlit room. Somehow, I can feel a shock, even the tremor in her last words, at least pain, the pain of robbed grandmotherhood. I love him, Mama. Oh, I really do. I only wish I had told you this earlier when Papa was still with us. A long silence falls between us. I watch her eyes roll deep into their sockets, deep into thoughts. They seem to peer into blank nothingness, drooping upon the formless shadows hanging on the walls. Our breaths grow louder, louder than the insects creeping about us. I look away. Then, again, I let my gaze rest on her. Pretense, false life is not my thing. She deserves to know. Everyone deserves to know, even Papa in his grave. Odi and I plan to adopt a child, but given the Nigerian condition, it won't be possible. So we will be moving to America next month. There will still be grandchildren, you know. You can always visit us in America. America. Mama, what about America? It is America. Mama, it is America. Yes, America. You have been infected with their disease. They give you not only their education, but also their disease. Mama, I'm not infected with any disease. I also want to tell her that I never had a thing for girls. My eyes and heart have always been for boys. Look, your father and I made a mistake. You should never have gone to America. Eish, America. She sinks to the floor, outstretches her legs, and lets tears stream down her aging cheeks. I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the readings.
Thank you, Tochiko. I'm sure that everyone also feels this emotional roller coaster listening to everyone's work and just how special it is to be a part of this reading. So thank you for sharing your work with everyone. Our next reader is Michael. Michael was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest and has published over 30 short stories and 2 collections of short stories, This Endless Road and The Filled in Spaces by Unsolicited Press.
Thank you. I am usually at a loss for these things. So first, a heartfelt thanks to Seattle Public Libraries, to Jack Straw, to my fellow writers. It's been a really tremendous journey. and fantastic opportunity. And I'm so excited to be able to share, and even more excited to hear what others have read and will be reading. So big virtual group hug for everybody. I'm going to read also from the anthology in the honor of tradition. So this is the first bit of a novel that I'm currently working on. Mukilteo, Washington, October 5th, 1990. The truck idles, shivering the rearview mirror. It had taken several attempts to get his eyeliner right, blinking and squinting at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Now, Logan considers wiping it away, but it's too late. His bandmates are squeezed into the cab of the truck beside him, and there is no way to get rid of the eyeliner without them noticing. Of course, their noticing would mean endless ridicule. The pitch of the engine deepens, and he glances down at the tachometer. The needle dips towards 400 RPMs, and he puts slight pressure on the clutch, and the needle comes slowly back up to 700. A horn honks, and he glances up at a green light. Eric, squeezed in the middle seat, says, "Fuck you. You know they can't hear you, right?" Ben asks. Leaning over Ben, Eric puts his head out the passenger window and shouts again as the truck picks up speed. Laughing, he lurches back into the cab, nearly knocking the truck out of gear with his knee. As the road curves towards the ferry docks, the guitar cases slide across the truck's bed and thump against the tailgate. Logan winces. He can barely afford gas. Damage to his Fender Telecaster would be a significant setback. He makes a mental note to tie down the guitar after the gig. A half mile later, Ben points to the right and Logan turns down a side street. The house is a dark brown split level partway up the block. Cars line the narrow road. A half dozen people linger near a skate ramp, slanting at a shallow angle at the end of the drive. Logan eases onto the gravel shoulder and cuts the engine. There's a rattle and clack of plastic wheels on the pavement as a lone skateboarder kicks past. Ben drops the tailgate and starts handing down equipment. "So nice to have a man around," Eric says. They leave Ben sitting on the tailgate with a drum kit and carry their gear inside. They don't know who lives here, but it doesn't matter. No one cares who owns the house. To care would mean that they are thinking about status or popularity. It would mean admitting that they cared about such things. And the only thing worth caring about, Logan thinks, is music. Even before they reach the top of the first set of stairs, there's a tangle of noise. There's the telltale synthesizer swish of Revenge of Shinobi and the clack of controller buttons in the living room. Music crackles through a stereo, but Logan can't name the band, and he knows not to ask. There are three girls sitting at a table in the kitchen, one of them rolling a joint, but she has to keep starting over. And Logan recognizes her, but he can't remember her name, although he's pretty sure she's in his 5th period math class. "You know where we're supposed to play?" Logan asks. The girl shrugs and points through a window at a cluster of people on the 2nd-story deck. The nucleus is a tall biker with a gray beard. As Eric heads outside, Logan sits on his amp. There's no injunction against talking to people, but Logan is navigating between the unspoken rules of punk and the rules that he's crafting for himself. For the past week, he's been imagining tonight's show. The image is careworn, as if it's been tucked in a back pocket of jeans washed too many times. With each reimagining of the scene, he changes minor details: the snarl on his face, the shirt he's wearing, his proximity to the crowd. He carves Kelly's face into the crowd, pulling from memories of conversations and making out on her lavender bedspread. In the imagined future show, she had kissed him, spit at him, turned her back on him. Eric puts his hand on Logan's shoulder, and Logan looks up. "What did he say?" Logan asks. We're supposed to play in the basement." "What else did he say?" I told him that we're the band, and he said, then fucking play. They make their way down the narrow staircase, trying not to bang their amps into people or walls. The basement has all the hallmarks of 1970s kitsch with wood paneling, burnt orange couches, and an aggregate hearth. Logan begins looking for outlets as Eric heads out to help Ben with the drum kit. As he carefully tunes his guitar, Logan runs over the set list again. It's simple enough. None of their 8 songs are longer than 2 minutes. They'll start with their mediocre cover of the Ramones' I Want to Be Sedated and end with the last minute edition of the Sex Pistols' God Save the Queen. And I'll go ahead and end there. Thank you so much. Thank you, EJ and SPL.
Thank you, Michael. We have Paulette next. Paulette is an award-winning writer and writing coach, and her work has been in the New York Times, Slate, Hobart, The Journal, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, and Vice.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here. I'm going to start with an essay. In a child's room, I stared at one of those primary colored toy workbenches. Its pegboard painted with outlines of where the plastic tools should go to show what's missing and where it should be. I thought, when you're in crisis, you can find a metaphor anywhere. I had been filling in the outline of my life for years when, with one decision, I wiped the board clean. Just a storage unit and the ghost stories about where I should be by now, the empty spaces where a husband or home or kids should have been. No lease, no plans, what now? I scrambled for something solid to kick off from, a direction to launch myself toward. Should I stay in the city, find my own place in a cheaper, unknown neighborhood, stay in my neighborhood with new, unknown roommates, move to a cabin in the woods, or damn it, maybe it was time to slink back into a cubicle and wrap myself in a paycheck and an adult's apartment. For weeks, 1,000 ghosts in my head. Then one day, one question stopped them all. My own voice asking, what would I do if I were a man? All the ghosts fell silent, and I only heard myself. I would backpack South America for 3 months and work from there. Of course, that's what you'd do. I booked tickets to Colombia that week. I had been finagling for years to get all my work online so I could earn money from anywhere. I had a few $1,000s in the bank, and I saw that I possessed all the ingredients I needed for an adventure I'd so long envisioned. But I had been too busy staring at all the outlines of what I didn't have to realize what I'd gained, that synonym for nothing left to lose. I replayed the moment I silenced so many ghosts in one fell swoop. The ghost of the stigma of being single in your 30s, the ghost of horrors of traveling alone, or what people would think of me traveling alone, the ghost of get a man now before your jowls fall. Without them, I could finally hear myself. Of course, I would visit the family I lived with for 2 years in Paraguay. Of course, I would hike Machu Picchu. Of course, I would stay in a bamboo house on the coast of Ecuador. Indiana Jones didn't look in the mirror, smooth his wrinkles, and wonder if he was getting a little too old to brave booby traps in the jungle. James Bond didn't make a pros and cons list weighing international espionage versus settling down with pussy galore. Rocky didn't go to brunch with his friends and say, do you guys really think I'm good enough to go for it as a boxer? I wish I didn't have to live in a world where this question changed how I thought, but I do. What would I do if I were a man really means, what would I do if I weren't a woman? If I weren't a woman, I would not have spent my life steeped in a totally different story about what I am. From the time I was a child playing video games with my brother, I wouldn't have assumed myself player B. If I weren't a woman, I wouldn't have had that impulse I did in Bolivia, where my friend joined me on an SUV tour of the salt flats. We were the only females with a group of 4 guys, 3 of them shorter than me. When it was time to go, my friend and I climbed in the SUV first, squished ourselves in the way back. as I jostled along, my knees knocking into the bars of the seat in front of me, watching the tiniest man of them all luxuriating in shotgun like an elf playing on Santa's throne, I turned to my friend and said, I think we sexismed ourselves. After the second stop, I got in the front seat without asking if I could have a turn. If I weren't a woman, I might not have asked the question I did after getting attacked by those yard dogs on a hilly island in Lake Titicaca, when the French woman who helped me prodded my wounds with such knowing hands, and I said, "Are you a nurse?" Her wife wouldn't have had to say, "She's a doctor." However, after my 3-month trip back home, I waited in the theater for the Star Wars starring Rey to start. And with every trailer I saw for other female-led movies like Annihilation and A Wrinkle in Time, I could see the world changing. Perhaps girls growing up now won't need to ask themselves what they would do if they weren't a woman to imagine what they could accomplish as a person. I thought the question, what would I do if I were a man, had done its job, but I've needed it again and again. I have more decisions to make. I have more outlines to draw in my life to say what belongs where and what's missing. What would I do if I were a man? Call myself a writer and a designer and an entrepreneur, hire an assistant, double my rates, make a dick joke, drive. Now I live a more brazen life because finally I get it. I truly get it after all this time. Whatever a man is, I am. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Paulette. I want to welcome Abby next. Abby is a Seattle-based writer, book artist, and editor whose work has been supported by journals including The Seventh Wave, EcoTheo, The Shore, and Denver Quarterly, and organizations such as Hugo House and the Seattle Review of Books.
Thanks so much, EJ. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. It's really special to get to read alongside so many members of my cohort whose work is just really stunning. And a big thank you to Sesha and to Seattle Public Library for hosting us, to Jack Straw and EJ for bringing us all together, and to everyone who's here watching with us tonight. It's really special to be able to share this community together. I am going to read 4 poems from my manuscript, which has been a part of my Jack Straw project, making revisions to this project, which is a feminist eco-poetic. It's invested in thinking about the reclaiming of agency and voice and women. So here's some poems. What is it you taste when you die in the night? The flecked spores of days pouring into crevices, between hill and fallen husk, between aspen and aspen, between tide and the gulls gulling of sky, with their calls to each other, with their catch of plum pit and prayer, with their calls to wind and lily and lighthouse and cliff. And there's never quite the same feeling as moonlight on the back of the thigh, slipping itself like tide over its pebbles, like a rat over gray-ashed leaves. Fawns stirring, thrumming toward the clearing of grasses and wind breath. It might all be hearsay. It might all be the day and its minutes, its answers of pebbles and wing, and etiquette trekked over knotted hours and knotted barks. It might be the silver silt in hardened lungs, frosting breath into glassy hoarfrost. Whisper, vesper. It might be all it is. All it is moonlight. Urban planning, when prayers for the body aren't enough. I am walking out of footprints. Body left behind in crystals. I am walking here next to rusted wires. A fester left behind where you once built a city of bodies on Sundays. Structures, lilies, lawns, palm pressed and praying. There, we spun whistles into anthems and peeled off scabs to watch the clots pearl. And what's the point of bridges anyway, hovering over nothing more than their marrow? Over this rucksack of riches, pearls unspooled and pooling, and this city crystal underfoot. On days like this, it's nice to remember how it feels, away from the sentence filled like a city. "7:28 p.m. Above the river, the bridge. And then there's a bee in the hand. Buzz nuzzled into skin, skin a muzzle when instinct clenches, and lily when fingers release. Now, all pink and blooming with sting, sting that rips the body from the body, that swells of pulse and insistence above sun-stained bricks, bricks belligerent in their heat, in their fortitude, in their inability to abandon post and dive in the water below, bellowing river, to unpluck reflection or mellow into tree branch or lamppost on that bright day. Sky just graying at the edges now, edging, building and bank into smoke and blur and smudge. No way to build sight but through sound, so listen. The last light that stings the palm, palms that stretch, reach, ravel, rub the day from the skin, the brick, hear it from the lily, the pulse, the palm, and now look up, look up. Out of pebbles. Tesseract the tendrils of heather. Hedgerow links lanes into an unruly alphabet. Its letters, the cleft of the mudslide. The cleft of the mudslide lettering in pretty and meaning it. Without condensing the body into something to ask for. Its hard things and soft things, all of its polished vertebrae. If it is too daring to unearth the dripped skins of birch trees, then what are we even doing here? What's left of the gritty heather? Mud silking down the knee. Of the field, what we've been seeking. The breezes and the pebbles and the plum tree. The borders of a body, that pleases. Throat strummed into lily. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Our last reader is Daniel. Daniel currently serves as Program Manager of Education at Hugo House in Seattle and is completing a novel about identity, migration, and belonging, set against the backdrop of contemporary US-China relations.
Thank you so much, EJ, and thanks so much to all the writers who so bravely shared their work tonight. It's been a real privilege to hear from all of you. Thanks also to Stesha and the Seattle Public Library for hosting us this afternoon. I'm going to be reading from that Jack Straw project called Transplants. All you need to know is that Lynn is originally from Qixien, a small rural town in northern China, where she's recently been expelled from her university for sleeping with her American English teacher, Travis. She enrolls at a community college in Cleveland, Ohio, and after weeks of loneliness and relative isolation is invited to a house party by a classmate named Tomas, which is where this scene starts. Lynn could hear the music before she even approached the door. The house was a two-story walk-up with clapboard siding painted purple and a snow-trampled path that led to a backyard. There were people congregating on the landing with plastic cups in their hands. standing in short dresses and cut-off shirts in spite of the weather. Lynn ascended the stairs. She'd already had 2 beers before taking the bus over, if only to inure herself to the cold, barely glancing up long enough at the people guarding the door to gauge whether her presence alone would draw stares. She had come with no one, after all, and had no reason to presume that anyone there would know her either. It was warm inside. At the entrance was a pile of coats, and Lynn added her jacket to the heap. She was wearing a dress she'd bought at a department store in downtown Cleveland, red and sleeveless, with ties that crossed beneath her chest. Looking at her reflection in the dressing room mirror, she was surprised by how well it fit, how the color complemented her complexion. Still, she'd imagined it was meant for someone else, someone for whom social graces were not elusive, who glided through life on the strength of her conviction. Lynn clutched the dress all the way to the register, determined to separate herself from that girl she'd known in China, too. People were crowding down the staircase into the basement. The room was thick with smoke, the smell like a Tixian restaurant after an end-of-semester banquet, tables and floors sticky with spilled liquor. She saw a laptop propped in one corner next to the speakers and, in another, a line for alcohol. Lynn queued at the end of it, her palms resting on her hips. Someone handed her a cup, and she drained it before reaching for a second. The bitter taste of baijiu from her own banquet had vanished, replaced by the cold, sudsy taste of possibility. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted the 2 Chinese girls from her English class. They were dressed in outfits Lynn recognized from the mainland, fake sequins, ruffles, chintzy fabric meant to be worn once and quickly forsaken. They sipped quietly from their cups, a resigned yearning to their glances. How utterly out of place they looked. Was this how those Chinese Americans had seen her too? Now, Lynn, that's a normal sounding name, a voice said, clasping her around the waist. It was Tomas. My aunt is named Linda, he said, like they'd been mid-conversation. That girl over there is Gua, I think, he continued, pointing over his shoulder. And I don't even know what the other girl is called, he said, leaning in closer. She never speaks. Lynn was reminded of her own childhood, what her former classmates used to hiss about her in the hallways. I'll talk your ear off if you let me, she said. She hadn't noticed it when she ran into him in the student union, but Tomas had the same freckles on his cheeks, the same high dimples. She began to wonder if he really did look like Travis, or whether all white people bore a particular resemblance. Lynn knew the way the story sounded, that Travis had taken advantage of her, that he'd used her until she finally desisted. And part of that was true. But Lynn knew that it was she who had first come on to Travis, that without him, she wouldn't have made it to America, to Ohio, to this house basement surrounded by cornfields. Now that she'd already come this far, she would make sure she'd have the last word. What brings you to Ohio? Tomas asked, calling out over the music. I got kicked out of school, Lynn said. Tomas gave her a look that suggested both concern and admiration. Lynn remembered the conversation she'd had with the registrar days before, the textbook answer she'd given then. It was the thing she was most ashamed of, and yet here she was, shouting it with abandon. Sleeping with my teacher, Lynn clarified, not waiting for Tomas to respond. She took another sip, smoothing her lips with her tongue. From over her cup, she thought she could see Tomas's expression change. Lynn felt, for the first time, that being expelled was its own form of credibility, that people might suddenly be interested in hearing what she had to say. She laughed once, loudly, a stab in the night. She saw the 2 Chinese girls lock eyes with her own, and yet felt no desire or obligation to approach them. I'll drink to that, Tomas said, raising his cup to hers. The music was pounding, floorboards pulsing beneath her feet. People all around her were stomping and jumping, and it felt like the entire floor would cave in at any moment. Tomas held out his hand, and Lynn took it, not the way she did when she first went to shake it, but clasped it, let him lead her out to where the crowd was all around them, making strange noises, whooping and clapping, for reasons Lynn wasn't entirely sure. The music picked up, reaching a feverish pitch. Lynn remembered what she'd first thought about Travis, that there would always be things about China that would never be enough. It was only now that she'd left that she'd finally start to understand that feeling, the permission to do whatever she pleased, to be unapologetically herself. She closed her eyes. The room spun in concentric circles around her. It was the last thing she remembered before it stopped. Thank you so much.
Hi there, everybody. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was great. And thank you to all of our readers. It was just such a pleasure to hear all of your work, and each one so special and different. We have time for questions from the audience. So if folks have questions, go ahead and pop them in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to remind all of you that you can find the Jack Straw anthology where these writers are published at our friends over at Open Books. I just popped a link in the chat there. And maybe if our writers want to unveil themselves, turn their videos back on, we can ask a few questions, as I think the audience is feeling a little shy, but we have a couple questions that we'll start with and see where we end up. So I am going to pose the first question. Let's see. So maybe I'm going to warn you ahead of time so you have time to listen. So let's see, C and Patrizia and Greg, why don't we direct the first question to you, and Pepe, let's do the four of you. How about that? Let's direct the first question to you. And so what are some challenges that you faced with your project? And could you talk a little bit about how you overcame them, or if you overcame them, because, we're not going to assume. So C, Patrizia, Greg, and Pepe. Anybody want to jump on that? Do I have to call on you? Pepe?
Oh God, yeah. Well, I guess for me, there's several challenges, right? I mean, the first one is that I've been writing in Spanish, solely in Spanish for the past 5 years. So, so going back to English, that was the first one going on. And then, I mean, everyone has a lot of stuff going on, same here. But I think it's not only the language, but also going back memory lanes. The first time that I actually work on, I guess, memoir, I'm gonna call it that way. It's not entirely memoir. I mean, there's some fictionalized stuff there as well. So trying to make work that out for someone who mainly works in fiction and starting to work in poetry is kind of new to me. I mean, and everything tends to be like I'm always dashing to the finish line, and everything there is like basically hot off the press. So, yeah.
Do you feel like you've overcome that, or do you feel like you're still figuring that out?
I feel better as time goes by. I was very nervous, and I get very nervous when I actually read in public because I have to practice a lot. My pronunciation, my diction, my pace, because I get nervous and I start like dashing through.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I feel the more I do it, the more I feel comfortable about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you did a great job today, and so your practice showed and paid off, and so
thank you.
C, do you have thoughts about that? Any challenges that you faced with your project, and if you overcame them, you'd like to share with the class?
Sure. I'm really generative. I think that was my biggest obstacle. And so knowing when to pause and to look at what is there and to arrange them and to have them be in conversation with each other and who is not in conversation with each other, it's like it feels like herding cats sometimes. So And I hope there isn't an end. There are ways with which this is a process. So I'm not akin to I'm over it. I hope I never get over it because that was what's inspired me to keep doing the work and doing this practice. So ongoing, and every new project and idea like brings another herd of cats. So I'm learning to enjoy it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Patrizia.
Yeah, I think I'm really in the thick of some of the challenges, to be honest. I think simply putting a book together and learning what that means and looks like, and unlearning whatever expectations I might put on myself around that or what it has to be. I think in poetry, there's so much room. I think across genres, there's a lot of room. It just demands us giving ourselves permission, right? So I'm still learning to like give myself permission to write in the ways about the things that I need to write about. And I think, to be frank, another challenge is just time. And I definitely haven't figured out overcoming, like carving out the space for myself and sustaining myself in a very expensive city. I think a lot of my cohort can relate. A lot of us work full time, and it can be really hard as a writer and artist with so many projects that I would love to give more time to. So frankly, our current reality is a major challenge, but I do feel like I'm overcoming at least, or learning how to give myself more permission in my writing on the page, and also give myself more permission to carve out what creative time I can.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a really important and tricky thing to juggle. Yeah. Yeah. If you figure it out, let us all know. If you figure that out, you can patent it or something. And Greg, do you have thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think, as a short story writer, I had a teacher one time tell us that, I mean, this probably goes for all writers, but as story writers, we end up writing the same story over and over and over again until you get it right. And so you think you're writing new stories, but it's just you're rehashing the same material until you finally craft it. And so one of the challenges, I didn't read, the pieces I read tonight were not actually from my Jack Straw project, but that project is a collection of stories. It's all about parenting and fathering specifically, and things of that nature. And so one of the challenges is not writing 10 versions of the same story, and trying to find the way that it's going to work with this situation and these characters, and then make sure that every piece is different, because I find myself sometimes writing the same sentence over again in another story, and then having to decide, well, where is it better? And that kind of stuff. So that's been a challenge for me.
And still overcoming.
Still overcoming. We're in the process of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in the process, and that it's ongoing, as C said. Yeah. Well, so for Abby and Paulette and Michael and Daniel, I have a different question for you all to consider. How did publishing either your first piece or a book, or even being published in the Jack Straw anthology, change your process of writing? And anybody want to jump on that, or do I need to call on you?
I can go.
Okay, Paulette.
I think when you publish, it creates a divide between writing for yourself and writing for consumption. And so really thinking about your relationship with that, and also maintaining your writing for yourself, and understanding that just because there are a lot of things to do around publishing, you don't have to do it all. And, pushing yourself to both put yourself out there, but then also maintaining your private practice of writing, I think is something that anyone who's, wading into the publishing world has to consider.
Interesting. Yeah. And so do you feel like you, I've heard different writers have different perspectives on this. Some think of their audience as they're writing, others can't think of their audience when they're writing because that is the wrong choice for them. And so do you feel like there's, once you know something's for publication, or is it, if it's being written with the intent to be published, does that change that?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm always writing considering that it might go to publication, but try to just focus on what it feels like for me, especially in nonfiction, and just be as honest as possible and probably not think about beyond the way that you frame it in a way that brings value to other people, as far as the like, oh my gosh, people are going to know this, especially for my piece in the anthology, which I had to like read in the dark for the video, because I was like, I have to read this to people. Yeah, I think it's different for everyone, but everyone, I think the important thing is that you're allowed to decide, and just because some people are doing it a certain way doesn't mean you have to do it a certain way. You can do it your own way.
Right. There's as many ways to do it as there are writers. So yeah. Daniel, what are your thoughts about that? Did publishing change your perspective on, or the process of writing?
It's a great question. I don't think I think Paulette, that answer was phenomenal. I do not have a great answer to the question, but I think I will say, it's always really humbling and really encouraging, I think, to have your work published. And I think that the biggest change for me is just feeling like there are folks out in the world who kind of believe in your work and are kind of encouraging you and supporting you to keep going. So that sort of additional conviction and confidence, I think, was a huge boost just to my own process in terms of sticking with it, staying self-disciplined, and staying determined to stay the course. Because for a lot of us, poets and novelists alike, these things take a long, long time. And I think every small bit of encouragement along the way is just really means the world to us all as writers.
Yeah, that's lovely. Everybody be nice to writers. They're working really hard. So, Abby or Michael, thoughts?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think this is such a complex question, and I think that Paulette and Daniel have done a really great job of thinking through it. I'll kind of maybe approach it from two ways, in that I think I actively try and prevent the idea of publication from impacting the pieces that I'm working on, because if I focus too much on something outside of the poem itself, then I might be more willing to hide and to not necessarily be as brave to the truth of what the piece itself needs to be. And I think when you're trying to do work that pushes you as a writer, that's very easy. It's very easy to say, oh, I don't want to push this muscle. I'm going to kind of go this other direction and go live in a crutch that might feel easy and feel comfortable and safe. But I think if for me, at least, if I'm not thinking about the fact that I might live in the world, it gives me the chance to feel braver, because I'm not worried about other perspectives.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, the act of publishing itself, I think, is actually a really beautiful complement to the writing life, because it allows time to digest, allows you time to write, to sit on pieces, to recognize your own belief in them when you send them out into the world, and to also have the chance to reconsider them down the road, whether they're rejected, whether they're accepted. I think it's a really great marker of your own recognition of process and of space. So I think there's certainly gifts in that journey, and also warning posts to be on the lookout for.
Yeah. Anything to add, Michael?
I agree with all of it. I guess the only things are probably similar, but the way that my mind works first is, the idea that there's no guarantee that a piece is going to get published. And I think that as a writing community, we don't always talk about rejections, right? Or very few people are saying, hey, I got rejected 15 times today. And so I think, having that in mind, that, I don't want to say you're only as good as your last piece, because I don't think that that's true, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that, if we're focusing about publication, as others have kind of hit on, we're losing sight of why we do this in the first place. And I think, it's kind of the same with thinking about audience. I think maybe selfishly, I'm kind of writing for myself first, and then just kind of hoping that it resonates with somebody else. So I don't know that it's changed my process, but outlook as I'm getting older and maybe a little bit wiser.
Yeah, we hope we all are, right? Well, so I have one more question. We're coming to the end of our time here, but I do have one more question for the group, and I'm going to just open it to the group. So who, because it's a hard one, so I'll let whoever feels like they want to talk about this talk about it. But what does literary success look like to you? And that can be a hard one, right? Because it might look like a book being published or a collection being published, but it might look different. Might look like selling out Benaroya Hall when you're on stage for Seattle Arts and Lectures, right? Or the library, being at the library.
I'll be brave and start off this conversation because I think that everyone's definitions of success is going to be very different. For me, and I think this connects to the conversation around publishing, if I have a piece in the world that resonates with someone and that speaks to them, and that whether it helps them or not, but it makes an impact on themselves, on their bodies, on their minds, I think that to me is really beautiful and the luckiest thing that I can offer as a writer.
That's really lovely. Other thoughts?
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think in a way it's always shifting, you know, and you're going to get there and you're going to feel it and then it's going to go away. And then, you know, so yeah, I love all those external outcomes, but yeah, I think like what Abby said of affecting, you know, sometimes the thing that feels the best is when one person emails you and it's just like, oh my gosh, like I'm trying to write a novel and the thing that I look for is like, this novel it's because of the topic that it considers, I tell myself this novel is going to save one person's life. Like one person is going to continue living because they read this novel and they were considering suicide and now they're not going to because they read my novel. And that is just my thing in my head that I say that keeps me writing and keeps me going. So yes, all that you said, Stesha, for sure, would love that. But barring becoming, you know, the next David Sedaris, those one-on-one, and I think that's why it's so important that people express gratitude when a piece touches them. Sometimes people will be like, sorry to email you, I just wanted to say, I'm like, no, this is like,
yeah,
this is the whole thing, right? So I really love hearing that feedback. And so yeah, but that ego is never quite satisfied, is it?
Yeah, well, and I think it comes down to like, or it can come down to the communication aspect, right? You're putting something out in the world, you want to know that somebody's receiving it, right? So, other thoughts as we're wrapping up?
Can I just say real quick, and not to be cheesy, but I think that this feels like success to me. Like being part of Jack Straw and like, yeah, there's the validation and yeah, there's a sort of imposter syndrome that I always suffer from. Like, how did I sneak into this group of amazing writers? But to me, like this is one of those things, and it's not about, you know, putting it on a resume or whatever. I mean, that's great too. I'm not going to like leave it off, but I think it's also just being part of a cohort and being able to improve in a number of ways and not just as a writer. So there you go. There's my cheesiness.
Not cheesy. Not cheesy at all. Anybody have one last thought before we close today, Pepe?
Yeah, I'd say that at least for me, and then probably I guess everyone feels the same way. Big part of literary success will be if 20, 30 years from now, I'm still writing and I'm still enjoying it and I'm still surprised by what comes out working every day. So I totally agree with what Michael, Paulette, and Abby have talked about. And I just add that on top of that. The rest of it is just icing on the cake.
I love that. I love that you're looking to the future. Yeah, that's great.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your work and being so vulnerable. Thank you so much, EJ. I know you snuck off screen there, but I see you in the comments and the chat. And there you are. Thank you so much for your phenomenal work. with this wonderful group of writers. And I also want to give a special shout out to Levi from Jack Straw, who I also saw in the chat. So hi, Levi. Thank you for your wonderful work with this wonderful group of writers. And Jack Straw, we are just so grateful to have such a wonderful organization in our community doing such wonderful work. So thanks to the folks at Jack Straw as well. I want to remind folks that if you are interested in this anthology, you can get a copy at our friends over at Open Books. I have put the direct link to the collection in the chat, and you can order it online. You can pick it up. You can stop by Open Books, and it's super easy. It's a great little store, so check that out. Thank you so much to everybody. We're really grateful to the sponsors who made today's program possible, the Seattle Public Library Foundation, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, and the Seattle Times. And of course, thank you to all of you who are watching. We're so grateful, and we'll see you next year for the next cohort. I'm sure we'll see you before then, but let's meet back here in a year and see the next cohort of amazing writers. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. Oh, and don't forget to set the clocks back.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye everybody.